I knew something was wrong the moment I walked into my brother Mark's engagement party. The ballroom was beautifully decorated with white lilies and twinkling lights, but no one approached to greet me. As I awkwardly searched for my place card at the reception table, my Aunt Patricia sidled up beside me. "He only invited you out of pity," she whispered, her breath smelling of champagne. "Your parents made him do it." I froze, scanning the room again. There was no name card for me, no reserved seat, and my own brother, who I had brought a thoughtful gift for, was deliberately avoiding eye contact. Without a word to anyone, I turned around and walked out. The next morning, Mark was pounding on my apartment door. "You did not have to make a scene," he said. "Before I tell you how this family drama unfolded, drop a comment letting me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you have ever felt like an unwanted guest at a family event." To understand why my brother's engagement party became such a painful experience, I need to take you back to where our relationship first began to fracture. Mark is 3 years younger than me, and for the first decade of our lives we were inseparable despite the age difference. We built elaborate blanket forts together, rode bikes through the neighborhood until sunset, and defended each other fiercely at school. There are family albums filled with photos of us with matching smiles, arms thrown around each other's shoulders. Everything changed when I turned 13, and our father left. The divorce was messy and bitter, with our mother struggling to manage her hurt and new responsibilities. I tried to step up, taking on more household chores and looking after Mark when Mom worked late. But while I processed my feelings quietly, Mark became increasingly difficult, acting out at school and throwing tantrums at home. "He is just having a harder time with the divorce," Mom would explain, excusing behavior that earned me swift punishment. When I got detention for being late to class after taking Mark to the school nurse, Mom lectured me about responsibility. When Mark skipped school entirely, she took him for ice cream to talk about his feelings. This double standard became the new normal in our household. Mark needed more attention, more understanding, more exceptions. I needed to be more mature, more helpful, more independent. Looking back, I recognize my mother was overwhelmed, but as a teenager, I only knew that my brother could do no wrong, while I could never quite do enough right. The defining incident came during my senior year of high school. I had been saving for months, from my part-time job to buy a used car, finally accumulating enough for a modest Honda with high mileage but reliable performance. The freedom it represented meant everything to me after years of taking the bus or walking everywhere. 3 weeks after I bought it, Mark, then 15, and without a permit or license, took my keys without asking and decided to impress his friends. The resulting accident totaled my car and caused minor damage to 2 other vehicles. Miraculously, no one was hurt, but my savings and independence were gone in an instant. I expected consequences for Mark, but instead my mother focused entirely on how grateful we should be that he wasn't injured. "It is just a car," she said when I expressed my anger. "Things can be replaced, family cannot." When I pointed out that Mark had stolen my keys and broken the law, she accused me of being materialistic and unforgiving. Mark himself never offered a genuine apology. "It was just sitting there most of the time anyway," he said with a shrug when I confronted him. "You should have let me drive it when I asked." That moment crystallized what would become our adult relationship. Mark would take or damage what mattered to me, face no real consequences, and somehow I would be positioned as unreasonable for being upset. The pattern repeated throughout our 20s, with borrowed items never returned, promises casually broken, and family events where his life updates dominated conversations, while mine were treated as afterthoughts. Despite this history, I made periodic attempts to improve our relationship, inviting him to dinner when he moved to my city for work, sending thoughtful birthday gifts, and attending family gatherings where I knew he would be the center of attention. These efforts yielded little meaningful change, but I maintained them out of a sense of familial obligation and the fading hope that adult maturity might eventually transform our dynamic. When Mark met Vanessa 2 years ago, I was cautiously optimistic that his relationship with her might positively influence his behavior. She seemed grounded and kind during our brief interactions, though these were limited, as Mark rarely included me in their social activities. When they became engaged last spring, I sent a congratulatory text that received a thumbs-up emoji. In response, the extent of our communication about this significant life event, the invitation to their engagement party arriving 6 months later, surprised me enough that I initially wondered if it had been sent by mistake. The gilt-edged card addressed to me and +1 seemed to suggest a potential thawing in our relationship. In retrospect, I should have recognized it as the reluctant gesture it was extended only after pressure from our mother and perhaps Vanessa, who might not have fully understood the complexity of our history. After receiving the unexpected invitation, I spent weeks deliberating whether to attend. The engagement party was being held at an upscale hotel downtown, requiring significant preparation and expense for someone like me, who had been essentially estranged from my brother for years. Still, the formal invitation offered a sliver of hope that perhaps Mark was ready to move past our difficult history. Maybe this is his way of extending an olive branch, suggested my best friend Layla when I called her for advice. People sometimes use big life transitions as opportunities to heal old wounds. The optimistic part of me wanted to believe this was possible. I had recently completed my master's degree and started a promising new job developments that had helped me build confidence and stability after years of struggling with the lingering effects of our dysfunctional family dynamic. Perhaps Mark had experienced similar growth and reflection. I decided to attend, putting significant thought into selecting an appropriate gift. After careful consideration, I chose a high-quality custom photo frame with their names and engagement date engraved, along with a generous gift card to their registry store. The present struck the right balance between personal and practical, demonstrating effort without overstepping the uncertain boundaries of our relationship. The week before the party, I texted Mark to confirm my attendance and ask if there was anything specific I should know about the event. His response was characteristically brief. Just formal attire. See you there. I interpreted the confirmation as a positive sign, another small indication that this might represent a fresh start for our relationship. I spent more than I could comfortably afford on a new dress, had my hair professionally styled, and even splurged on a ride share to the venue to avoid any risk of being late. As the car approached the hotel, I rehearsed potential conversation topics with Mark and Vanessa, determined to focus on their happiness rather than our complicated past. The hotel lobby was elegantly decorated with a sign directing guests to the Harrison engagement celebration in the Magnolia Ballroom. Following the indicated path, I arrived at a reception table where a cheerful young woman was checking names against a guest list and distributing place cards. "Good evening. Name, please," she asked brightly. "Emma Harrison," I replied, setting down the carefully wrapped gift on the designated table nearby. Her smile faltered as she scanned the list multiple times. "I'm sorry I don't seem to have you here. Could you be under a different name?" The first twinge of unease settled in my stomach. "I'm the groom's sister. Maybe under family section." She checked again, then called over another staff member who consulted a separate clipboard. After a brief whispered conversation, the second woman smiled apologetically. "You're not on our final seating chart, but please, go in and enjoy the celebration. I'm sure there was just a mix-up with the paperwork." Attempting to maintain my composure, I entered the ballroom, immediately struck by how many people were already there. At least 100 guests filled the space, clustered in animated conversation groups. I scanned the room for familiar faces, spotting my mother and stepfather near the center, my Aunt Patricia at the bar, and finally Mark and Vanessa greeting guests near a beautifully decorated table. As I worked up the courage to approach them, my aunt intercepted me, champagne glass in hand. Patricia had always been unusually blunt, a trait that intensified when she drank. Her whispered revelation about my pity invitation struck with devastating precision, confirming the suspicions that had begun forming from the moment I arrived. Looking around the room with new awareness, I noticed what I had initially missed. Each table had a small card listing assigned guests. Moving between several, I confirmed what Patricia had implied: there was no place set for me at any table. No accommodation had been made for my presence. The invitation had been extended with the expectation, perhaps even the hope, that I would decline. The realization was crushing. I had spent weeks anticipating this event, investing emotionally and financially in the possibility of reconnection, only to discover I was an afterthought, included only to satisfy someone else's sense of propriety. As I stood frozen near the entrance, I caught my brother's eye across the room. He quickly looked away, turning his attention to other arriving guests. That deliberate avoidance made the decision for me. Without attempting to speak to anyone, I turned and walked out, leaving the gift behind as the only evidence I had been there at all. The quiet dignity of my exit felt like the only power I had in that moment, the only way to preserve what remained of my self-respect. The rideshare driver, who had waited nearby hoping for a return fare, noted my early departure with concern. "Everything okay? That was a quick party." "There was a mistake with the invitation," I replied, voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "Could you take me home, please?" Once safely back in my apartment, the emotional impact hit full force. I spent the night alternating between tears of humiliation and anger, questioning why my own brother would put me in such a position, and why I had allowed myself to hope for better treatment after years of evidence that nothing had changed. My phone remained silent that night, no texts or calls from Mark, my mother, or anyone else at the party checking on my abrupt departure. This final confirmation of my insignificance in their eyes eventually exhausted my tears, leaving only a hollow resignation that persisted until Mark's unexpected appearance at my door the following morning. The aggressive pounding on my apartment door at 8:30 the next morning startled me out of a restless sleep. Peering through the peephole, I was surprised to see Mark standing in the hallway, his expression a mixture of irritation and impatience. For a moment, I considered not answering, but decided confronting this situation directly might provide some needed closure. "You did not have to make a scene," were his first words as I opened the door, no greeting or acknowledgement of how I might be feeling after the previous night's humiliation. "I did not make a scene," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I left quietly when it became clear I was not actually welcome." "Everyone noticed you storming out," he countered, pushing past me into my apartment without waiting for an invitation. "Mom is upset." Vanessa's parents were asking questions, and now, instead of enjoying the morning after our party, I have to deal with this drama. The audacity of positioning himself as the victim was so predictable that I almost laughed. There was no place for me at any table, Mark. No name card. Nobody greeted me. Aunt Patricia told me you only invited me because Mom made you. What exactly was I supposed to do? He paced my small living room, running a hand through his hair in the frustrated gesture I recognized from childhood. "You could have just found me, and I would have figured something out. These events are complicated to plan. Some things fall through the cracks." "Your only sister does not fall through the cracks, unless you want her to," I said. This was deliberate, and we both know it. Mark's expression shifted the defensive anger, giving way to something more calculated. "Look, things have been strained between us for years. Vanessa thought including you was the right thing to do, but I knew it would just be awkward for everyone. You always make everything so difficult, Emma. You have this victim mentality that makes people uncomfortable." The casual cruelty of his assessment hit hard, but also clarified something I had been struggling to accept. My brother did not value me, or want me in his life, and no amount of effort or forgiveness on my part would change that fundamental reality. "I need you to leave," I said quietly. "I will not attend your wedding or any other events. I release you from whatever obligation you feel to include your difficult sister in your perfect life." Instead of relief, my statement seemed to trigger fresh irritation. "So now you are going to make Mom miserable by refusing to come to the wedding. This is exactly what I am talking about. Everything becomes a dramatic statement with you." "This is not about Mom or making statements," I replied. "This is about me finally accepting that we do not have a relationship worth maintaining. I have spent years trying to connect with you, despite how you have treated me, and last night made it abundantly clear that those efforts are not wanted or appreciated." As our confrontation escalated, my phone began ringing. The caller ID showed our mother's name, perfect timing, that suggested Mark had coordinated his visit with her. I declined the call and returned my attention to my brother. "Mom is going to take your side regardless of what happened," I said, "just like she always has. I am not interested in another round of being told how I should be more understanding of your feelings while mine are dismissed." Mark's response was coldly pragmatic. "Fine. Skip the wedding. It is probably better that way anyway. But when Mom calls, and she will keep calling, tell her it was your decision so she does not blame me or Vanessa." The request was so characteristic of our relationship that it provided an almost fitting conclusion. Even in this moment of severing ties, his primary concern was ensuring he would not face consequences for his actions. Some patterns never change. After Mark left, my phone continued to ring throughout the day. My mother's calls eventually supplemented by texts from my stepfather and even Aunt Patricia, whose alcohol-induced honesty the night before had apparently been replaced by family loyalty in the sober light of day. I responded to none of them, needing space to process what had happened and what it meant for my future relationship with my family. The following days brought an onslaught of family pressure. My mother left tearful voicemails about family unity and forgiveness. My stepfather sent awkwardly formal texts, suggesting I was overreacting to a simple oversight. Most surprisingly, Vanessa called, claiming she had been unaware of the seating arrangement issue and wanted to clear the air. I maintained my silence not out of spite, but self-preservation. Years of family dynamics had taught me that engagement would only lead to me being positioned as unreasonable regardless of the circumstances. Instead of responding, I focused on processing my feelings with my therapist, who had been helping me navigate my complicated family relationships for the past year. "What do you really want from these relationships going forward?" she asked during our session that week. "Not what you think you should want, or what would make everyone else comfortable, but what would actually be healthy for you." It was a question I had avoided confronting, directly caught in the cycle of obligation and disappointment that had defined my family interactions for so long, now forced to examine it by circumstances that could no longer be ignored or rationalized away. I found surprising clarity emerging from the hurt. In the weeks following the engagement party incident, I experienced what my therapist called a necessary grieving process. I was mourning not just the current breakdown in family relationships, but the fantasy I had maintained that things could somehow be different if I just tried hard enough, forgave enough, or found the right approach to connect with my brother and mother. The first stage was intense, sadness days, when getting out of bed required monumental effort and random triggers would bring tears. A childhood photo I had forgotten to put away, a song Mark and I had loved, as kids, even seeing siblings, interacting normally in public places. During this period, I continued ignoring the stream of messages from family members, each contact feeling like salt in an open wound. This sadness gradually transformed into anger, a emotion I had rarely allowed myself to fully experience in relation to my family. I began writing unsent letters, expressing years of accumulated hurt and resentment, naming specific incidents when my feelings had been dismissed or my needs sacrificed for Mark's comfort. Though I never intended to send these letters, the process of articulating my experiences validated them in a way family conversations never had. Anger is a natural response to being treated unfairly, my therapist assured me. It only becomes problematic when it consumes you, or when you act on it destructively. After nearly a month of minimal contact, I finally answered one of my mother's calls. The conversation was difficult but necessary, with me setting clear boundaries about what I was and was not willing to discuss. "I am not going to debate what happened at the engagement party," I told her firmly. "My experience was real, and I am not interested in being told why I should not feel hurt by it." My mother cycled through her usual tactics, minimizing "it was just a miscommunication," guilt, "family should forgive each other," and finally, emotional manipulation. "This is breaking my heart, Emma." When these failed to move me, she tried a new approach. "Mark and Vanessa are willing to formally apologize if that is what you need to move forward. They will even put you in the wedding party to make up for the misunderstanding." The offer, clearly designed to restore the appearance of family harmony rather than address the underlying issues, crystallized my decision. "I do not want an apology that you force them to give, and I definitely do not want to be in their wedding party," I replied. "What I want is honest acknowledgment of the patterns that have shaped our family relationships and a commitment to changing them. Without that surface, reconciliation would just set us up for more of the same." My mother fell silent, genuinely surprised by my firm stance. "I do not know what you want from me," she finally said. "I want you to hear me," I answered simply. "Not to defend, explain, or fix, but just to listen and understand that my experiences and feelings are as real and valid as Mark's have always been." The conversation ended without resolution, but it marked an important shift in our dynamic. For the first time, I had articulated my needs without apology or compromise, prioritizing my emotional well-being over the family's preference for comfortable denial. Over the next several months, I focused on building what therapists call chosen family, deepening connections with friends who demonstrated consistent respect and care. Layla and her husband included me in their holiday celebrations. My colleague Jordan introduced me to a hiking group where I developed new friendships based on shared interests rather than obligation. My neighbor Elena and I established a weekly dinner tradition that provided reliable connection and support. These relationships, freely chosen and mutually nurturing, served as powerful contrasts to my family dynamics. In them, I experienced what healthy attachment felt like: disagreements addressed openly rather than through manipulation, boundaries respected rather than challenged, and appreciation expressed specifically rather than withheld or conditioned. 2 months before Mark and Vanessa's wedding, my mother made another attempt at reconciliation, this time approaching with more humility than previous conversations. Over coffee at a neutral cafe, she acknowledged that she had treated Mark and me differently throughout our childhood, though she framed it as responding to our different needs rather than favoritism. "I never meant to make you feel less important," she said, the closest she had ever come to acknowledging my experience. "I always thought you were the strong one, the one I didn't have to worry about." "Being seen as strong shouldn't have meant being taken for granted," I replied. "And Mark being seen as fragile shouldn't have meant excusing behavior that hurt others." We talked for nearly 3 hours, covering ground that had been off limits for decades. While not every point was resolved, the conversation represented progress in its honesty, and my mother's willingness to listen without immediately defending or dismissing my perspective. At the end, she brought up the wedding again, but with a different approach. "I understand why you don't want to attend, and I won't pressure you anymore," she said. "But I hope you'll consider that relationships can change if people are willing to put in the work. Mark may not be there yet, but closing the door completely means never finding out if things could be different." Her words stayed with me, raising questions about forgiveness and possibility that I continued exploring in therapy. Was maintaining complete separation from my brother truly the healthiest choice? Or was there a middle path that protected my boundaries while leaving space for potential growth? The answer emerged gradually as I strengthened my sense of self-worth, independent of family validation. True reconciliation would require acknowledgment and change from both Mark and my mother, but my healing didn't depend on their participation. I could choose my level of engagement based on what felt safe and authentic, rather than default to either total estrangement or complete vulnerability. A week before the wedding, I sent Mark a card congratulating him and Vanessa, including a modest but thoughtful gift certificate. The note inside was simple and honest: "I wish you both happiness in your marriage. While our relationship has been complicated, I hope you find joy in this new chapter of your life." His response, a brief text saying, "Thanks for the gift," contained neither apology nor invitation to reconnect, confirming that my decision to maintain distance was appropriate for the current reality of our relationship. Some doors remain closed not because of unwillingness to open them, but because no one is knocking from the other side. Today, 2 years after the engagement party incident, my life has transformed in ways I could not have anticipated during those painful weeks of confrontation and decision. The energy previously invested in trying to secure family connection has been redirected into personal and professional growth. I have been promoted at work, completed a certificate program in my field, and even started dating someone who demonstrates what healthy love looks like in practice. My relationship with my mother has evolved into something more honest, if not always comfortable. We speak monthly, maintain appropriate boundaries, and acknowledge past patterns without allowing them to dictate present interactions. Mark and I have no direct contact, though I occasionally receive updates through my mother. He and Vanessa are expecting their first child, news I can now receive without the complicated pain that would have accompanied it in the past. The most significant change, however, has been internal. The engagement party humiliation that once felt like confirmation of my worst fears that I was unwanted and unimportant to my own family has instead become a turning point in reclaiming my value. Being excluded from that event ultimately led to my inclusion in relationships and communities where I am genuinely appreciated, not merely tolerated. Sometimes the most painful rejections create space for the connections we truly deserve. The empty place setting at that engagement party table represented not just my brother's failure to include me, but the universe making room for the full life, waiting beyond the limitations of family expectation. Have you ever experienced a painful family exclusion that ultimately led to positive change in your life? How did you navigate the difficult emotions while establishing healthier boundaries? Share your story in the comments below to help others who might be going through similar family struggles right now. If this journey of setting boundaries and finding worth beyond family validation resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about navigating complex relationships. Share this video with someone who might need permission to prioritize their emotional well-being in difficult family situations. Thank you for listening to my journey from rejection to self-acceptance. And remember that sometimes not being included is the beginning of finding where you truly belong.